And the reason we moved out here was on account of the war was on. And places were hard to get, and so my husband had been through the Halifax Explosion, so he was always worrying about that. You know, he didn't forget that. So we moved out here to get away from the city.
Now, what happened to him in the Halifax Explosion?
Well, he was, I was his second wife. He was married before, and he was watching the ship as it was burning, and all of a sudden the explosion. So his wife wasn't hurt, but he was badly hurt. But then she died 4 years later, not from the explosion, just from other reasons. That time we rented it,
Right.
and it had been empty for about 8 years, because the the lady that owned it, who was Mrs. Maynard's, Charlie Maynard's wife, she was the daughter of the man that owned this place. That's where she was born, in this house. And it was the first time it ever had been rented out to another family. And she didn't want to really rent it, but it was pretty old, and it was no convenience, no water, no sink, no inside facilities at all. So it was just, yeah, pretty well run down, yeah. Run down that when you walked on the floor, you thought you were going out the other wall. So we lived here they didn't want to fix it up, and houses were hard to get. I was lucky to get this place at that time. And then they didn't want to spend any money on it, so we didn't pay very much rent. We only paid, what, $12 a month rent. And then after 4 or 5 years, then we got a pump in ourselves, and we did a little finish. It was very rough. Upstairs it wasn't finished, it was just the beams, and in they called it the L kitchen at that time. And it was basically, we used it for a kitchen, but it was rough. It was all, you know, just natural wood, rough wood. And then in time, well, when the old lady, she died, and then the place was her son's. Well, he had remarried. He had never lived in the house himself. He remarried. His widow, she sold the place to Mr. Davis. And we had lived in here then 10 years. So she wanted to sell. So anyway, we moved up in upper middle Sackville. We only stayed there about 3 months, and Mr. Davis, who had bought the place, came up and told us if we wanted to move back, which I felt bad when we left, although we didn't have any conveniences. But we did get the lights in after 5 years when we lived here. Put them in ourselves.
Okay. Now, where in Middle Sackville do you live?
Right opposite the Grace property. The house next, you know where that war surplus store is up there?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're right next door to that. The house up further, you know.
How much actual land did you own? Just where the house is now?
Your place,
Right.
where you are now, and yes, this, and then we bought where the other house is, where the Bennetts are. We owned like the 3 lots.
I see.
But the first going off, we bought the 2 lots, and then we bought the other lot afterwards. See, we were here first, and then when Mr. Maynard's mother died, the place was left to Mrs. Maynard's brother, and then he died, so then his widow, second marriage, she sold, and that was why we moved, and then we moved back again. Tom decided that the chimney wasn't as, well, it was stable, I would think, but he thought it was tilting or something, so anyway, he decided one day when I was in town shopping to pull it down. And the kids, Kenny was probably around 14 maybe, 15, around 14 years old. So when I came home from town, I got off the bus down at the corner, I was walking up and I met Kenny and one of the other kids, and they were black, all the soot all over them. And I said, what in the world were you doing? Yo, you got a surprise when you get home. I said, why, what happened? Well, Dad took the chimney down. So when I got home, everything was soot, dirt. They were wheeling the rocks right through the kitchen, right out to the L kitchen, outdoors. And the soot, mud, had them clean out. I didn't know whether I was going to set the table for supper. But anyway, it was an awful mess. But anyway, so that was the end of that, the chimney. Well, he just took it down to the main, just down to the bottom of the floor. But it would never have, you know, that chimney would never have gone bad because it was great big bricks. It wasn't a brick chimney. It was a rock chimney, and it was about must have been about 6 feet wide. Well, it was the width of that stairway out there, and the width of that wall there. So it would, and you could stand up in it.
Yeah.
But at that time, they used to use it for bake. They used to do all their baking in that there. But it wasn't very good in the wintertime because, it was no way of heating the house. And so they used to put a little stove up in front of that and just put the pipe right into the chimney. And, really it wasn't a very good heating system. In fact, we nearly froze to death the first winter we lived here. Well, outside, really, not that many changes, except we raised it. It was down low on the ground. It only had a dirt cell basement in it, and just a hole, really, just one little hole in the basement. And we used to keep our vegetables. And then the stairway went up off where the bathroom is now. It was a closed-in stairway. There was a door on it, and just very round, curved up, just straight up, and off of the bedrooms upstairs. There were 2 bedrooms. One wasn't finished, and the other one was, had a door on it. And this room here had a partition where that cupboard is now, and I think a little partition there. But anyway, it was like two individual rooms. But then when we made one big kitchen of it, it was kind of a dining area, you know what I mean? And but it really was a dining room because they used that outside place for a kitchen. And then there was a door here, and then the little entrance there. The front door was there, the entrance, and then there was another wall. There was a door into the living room. And we were only the second family that ever lived in this house, the people that owned it and us. So that was it makes you feel like kind of at home, eh?
Yeah.
Because I never really had a home of my own. My father and mother, they were dead, died when I was small, so we really didn't have a home. So this more or less was the first real home. And then 2 of the children were born here. We had a big L kitchen on there. They used to call them L kitchens then. And it was just rough boards, and you could see out through the boards outside with shingle, no finish on in the inside, just real dark, old lumber, how it looks. And then upstairs also was only one room finished. It wasn't really finished good, but it was finished a bit. The beams upstairs were exposed, and there was no door on that room. And the stairway was just one of those old stairways that came down on a curve and a door on the bottom of it. I remember Kenny one time, was it Kenny or David? I forget which one. Wheeled the tricycle over and fell right down the bottom of the steps.
Yeah.
But he didn't get hurt.
No. How old is this house now? Do you know?
It must be nearly 200 years old, as far as I can figure.